sommes ravis évidemment de recevoir donc, le docteur Rolly Jones et Tim Conley. Donc, ils appartiennent à l'organisation Med Global Humanitarian. Alors, je les avais déjà rencontrés dans d'autres congrès. Et donc, en fait, effectivement, ils vont d'un pays à l'autre pour faire de l'enseignement, mais pas que. Ils font aussi de la pratique médicale dans des pays où il y a des situations de guerre avec exposition aux produits chimiques. Donc, ils sont allés en Ukraine, en Syrie, au Liban, dans les territoires occupés, en Irak. Voilà. Bon, donc, ils vont nous présenter très brièvement leur association. Et puis les deux exposés donc, sur la décontamination et sur les patients irradiés.
Okay. Yes. I think okay. Hello everyone. The volume is okay? Okay. So my name is Riley Jones. I am a physician at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida in the United States. I've been working with the Med Global organization, as Dr. Bruno mentioned, since before COVID came. And a little bit about the organization. We work in, I think, 13, 15 different countries, many of which are in the MENA region. We do humanitarian intervention. We work in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza. We have worked in Morocco after the earthquake, and many other places in the world, just doing direct patient care and also trying to do what we can with our experience from Syria, where chemical weapons attacks did occur, and trying to prepare health systems for how to minimize the amount of damage and destruction that happens for these very serious, very dangerous events that we often don't have very deep training into, and for us to be manage those appropriately. And so that's what we're doing for Med Global. And so I'd like to introduce my partner. This is Tim Conley. He's an emergency medicine technician. He drives ambulances in the United States, and he runs disaster response for the state of Illinois. And he's shaking his head no, but he's doing a lot of state level and national level things for the United States. He's also been working abroad for Med Global for quite some time now. And I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to start with a discussion on decontamination, some new updates in the field of decontamination science. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you for inviting us to be here. I very, very much appreciate it. First time in Morocco, and I can tell you Fez is an amazingly beautiful city. I had no idea. So thank you so much for inviting us to be here. As Dr. Riley said, I'm a paramedic. I'm also a healthcare emergency manager, which means that I run medical disaster response. And then for Med Global, I do emergency disaster response, and I lead the chemical weapons program, with Dr. Riley being our medical oversight for the program. So as he mentioned, we worked in several countries. When the war broke out in Ukraine, Med Global spoke with the Ministry of Health in Ukraine, and Dr. Riley had a really interesting experience running in there during the war. At the first couple days of it, being led by police and military and everything else to talk to them. One of the first things they asked for was chemical weapons training. So we came back, and I would just join Med Global shortly after that, and we started training them the way that you probably all have been trained, in the way we do in the United States, using soap and water, not doing any patient care until after they've been deconned. And it takes a long time to set those things up. To be perfectly honest, Ukraine said no. That's not going to work for us. We don't have the resources to do that. We don't have the personnel to do that. Did we mention this is a war zone? Did we mention we're depleted resources quickly? So we put a stop to the training, and we went back to the drawing board. And one of our partners found a study for decontamination without water called the PRISM study. And that recommends several changes in the way you do decon. Speeding up the process significantly, not using water, and delivering much faster medical care and treatment. So that's what I'm going to focus my talk on, is that study and how we're successfully using that now. It's been very well received in Ukraine. We're actually teaching it in Illinois. We taught it at Minatox, Middle East, and North African Toxicology Association Conference, and it's been supported by that group, and we're seeing really good results with it. If you have any questions, please ask as I'm going, and if you know any jokes that are better than mine, I would really like to hear them, because I've done this lecture so much I bore myself. All right, that was funny, but apparently I'm the only one that thought so. All right, thank you. You're my new best friend. All right, so it takes way too long to set up water systems, right? We did an exercise in my hospital when I was selling PRISM study to my healthcare institutions, and we timed it. And if one patient comes in, take a shower, that's great, that's super easy. But when you get 4 or 5 patients or 10 patients or more, or you get just a handful of non-ambulatory patients, it takes a very long time to set up, to wet decon those people, right? The PRISM study was done by the U.S. military, the U.S. Fire Service, U.S. hospitals, and then there was a second study completed in England, okay? Both studies showed the most exact same results, that dry decon is at least as effective as wet decon, okay? Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, right? It showed that we were taking too long to do patient care. We were letting patients die while we were setting up decon showers. I kid you not, 25 years ago, I went to a patient with organophosphate on them, okay? Which you all know is very similar to nerve agents and signs and symptoms, exposures, etc. At the time, I thought I couldn't go do anything for them until they were deconned. So I literally stood like this and watched the patient seize, waiting for decontamination, right? Now, using this study, knowing what I know now, I should have put a suit on, grabbed some towels, and go take care of the guy, all right? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Speed of decon is the key. The federal government spent a lot of money figuring out what you guys could have figured out in 5 minutes, that the faster you get a chemical off somebody, the better they're going to do. It's shocking, right? They spent millions of dollars to figure that out. So the faster you can decon them, the better off. Are you guys not seeing my slides anywhere? I just realized that. Oh, now there. Okay. Excellent. So the speed of decon is what's important. So in the PRISM study and the follow-on study in England, and granted, both studies were very small. I think the study, and Bruno, if you know, I think the study in England was 8 people. I think that was 8 people, I believe it was. And then the study in US was similar numbers, right? But the results were identical. And it's common sense. The faster we get the chemical off the patient, the better off we're going to do. So what the study showed is, don't delay medical care. Put appropriate PPE on and start treating the patients. Decon them as quickly as possible. Dr. Riley and I have actually talked. This decon system I'm going to show you is so simple that we should make a video of how to do this. And if there's a train accident or a chemical weapons attack, give that to the media and say, tell people at home how to decon themselves until help can get there. That's how simple this system is. Okay? There's lots of, it's not a everything system though. There's advantages to dry decon and there's disadvantages to dry decon. Okay? Disadvantage to dry decon is it will not work on powders. Okay? If it's a powder, you have to use water. Okay? If it's a highly corrosive acid, you have to use soap and water. Okay? And I asked some of the smart toxicology people I know and said, if I don't know what the product is, how do I know if it's acidotic? And they said, if you see skin changes, use water. If you don't see skin changes, you can do dry decon. So if it's a liquid and they're getting sick from it, you can use dry decon. Aren't you glad I didn't read all that to you? All right. The other thing that we identified is we were not deconning the people in the right order. We weren't doing an effective job of triage. All right? And this is true not only in hazmat incidents, but as we were talking about during lunch, in any mass casualty incident. We need to be more effective in our choices of how we do triage, who we decide to give medical care first, etc. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States looked at all the different possible triage systems out there and picked the best parts of each one, and they came up with this called SALT triage. It stands for Sort, Assess, Life-Saving Treatment, and Transport. Okay? If you're looking at a hazmat or a chemical weapons or any mass casualty environment, but particularly hazmat, chemical weapons, or conflict area, it's a perfectly suited triage system for that. Okay? It's really simple. The first thing you do with SALT triage is, you have your crowd over here. You get on a PA or a loudspeaker. Anybody who can walk, go stand over here. So are the patients that walk over there critical? No. There might be somebody with a pneumothorax or a tension pneumothorax or something that slips in. But the majority of the people who walk over here are going to be just fine. All right? Remind me when we get into more on decontamination to talk about that pile that just walked over here. The second thing you want to do is yell. If you can hear me, but you can't get to me or you can't move, yell, scream, get my attention. Okay? What do you think you're going to do for those people? Who says completely ignore them? I say completely ignore them. Because who do you want to talk to first? The people that have enough mentation, they're awake enough to respond by yelling and screaming, or the people that can't yell and scream? So you're actually going to ignore the screaming people, and you're going to go right to the ones that aren't responding, because they're your most critical patients, right? Then you're going to work your way back to the people that screamed, and then to the walking wounded, okay? Now, when you look at each patient, it's 4 simple questions. And the reason that I like these 4 simple questions for the hazmat environment is it's almost all observation. You can't, when you're in a hazmat suit, as you'll see when we do the demonstration, you can't listen to lung sounds. You can't even do a radial pulse. You can't take a blood pressure. You can't do any of those things. So you're making 4 observations. 1, is the patient alert and obeying commands? If he's alert and obeying commands, he's got a blood pressure because he's perfusing. His brain is getting oxygen and sugar. He's doing okay. Number 1. Does he have a peripheral pulse? In the hazmat environment, I ignore that one because if they're awake, they have a peripheral pulse. They're perfusing. Okay? Are they in significant respiratory distress? If they're in significant respiratory distress, they're a critical patient or a red. If they're not, they're a yellow or a green. Does that make sense? And do they have a major hemorrhage you can't control? If somebody has an arterial bleed and you can put a tourniquet on it and stop that, they're not critical anymore. They're what we call yellow or they can intermittent. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's those questions. Then from there, you get to use your clinical judgment on whether they're a moderate or minimal based on your experience, the number of people waiting, and that kind of stuff. If I have a fractured ankle and it's pointed 90 degrees the wrong direction, and there's 5 patients, should I be a green, a minimal, or a yellow, a moderate? I'm in a lot of pain. There's only 5 patients. I probably should be a yellow, right? If my ankle's pointed 90 degrees sideways and there's 100 patients, I'm a green all day long. Does that make sense? So it allows for some clinical judgment. The other difference in the triage systems at this point is in SALT, we want you to do limited patient care. Things that are going to save lives, right? So decompressing a pneumothorax, all right? Now, remember, you can't listen to lung sounds. You can't do a lot of things you would do to make that clinical decision under normal circumstances because you're in a hazmat suit or you're doing quick triage. So how would you know if somebody has a pneumothorax? Attention pneumothorax. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. They would seem unstable. They see in respiratory distress. Absolutely. Okay? Anything else? Yeah, they look like they're in shock. They're a little cyanosis. Absolutely. Okay? You know, maybe some jugular vein distension, right? A little bit. And a mechanism of injury that supports attention pneumothorax. If there was an explosion associated with this event, they were exposed to a blast wave, does that support attention pneumothorax? Yeah. In the old days, we would let people die waiting to get through decon before we did anything about that. You know, that's something that we should be fixing as soon as we find it while we're doing triage. Okay? Putting those tourniquets, that kind of thing. If you're not sure if the patient has attention pneumothorax, and I know you guys are experienced clinical providers, so you already know this, but it just makes me feel better to say it. If you're not sure if the patient has attention pneumothorax, decompress them, right? If they have attention pneumothorax and you don't decompress them, they're going to die. If you do decompress them and they didn't have one, they're probably going to be fine, right? Maybe a little pneumothorax. All right. So, and I'm not going to go through the toxidromes with you guys. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the toxidromes, and that's a whole separate lecture. But it's really important, this being an overview, to remember toxidrome recognition at this point in your triage. Because the other thing they want you to do during triage is give medical countermeasures. So if we saw signs and symptoms of a nerve agent, salivation, lacrimation, urination, GI distress, bronchorrhea, fluid coming everywhere, etc., we'd want to give them atropine during triage if it's available. If it's available is the operative word, right? But as soon as we can give it, pre-decon, during decon, after decon, we want to give it as soon as we can. All right? All right, so when we do the practical today, we're going to treat patients while in a hazmat suit. We're going to demonstrate that. Because I said earlier, patients die waiting for decon and treatment. My patient 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was, I have no concept of linear time, right? If I would have put a suit on and gone in and started dry deconning him and started giving him a benzodiazepine, Valium or Versed or something like that for a seizure, he probably would have had a lot better outcome. But I just didn't know at the time. So learn from my mistakes and do better than I did in that case. But we're going to want to do care as soon as we recognize the patient needs that critical life-saving care. So when you're doing the care, you want to think about what you can and can't do. You know, if I have one patient, say, by me, we see organophosphate incidents once in a while because I live in a farm area, right? So the farmers will get organophosphate on them and they'll seize and those kind of things, right? If I have one patient and I'm in a hazmat suit and I'm dry deconning him and he's having a seizure, can I start an IV while I'm in a hazmat suit, you think? No. The gloves, no dexterity, that kind of stuff. And you'll see that when we do the demonstration. But do you think I could drill an interosseous? 100% I could. If I have one patient, I can bag them. Ooh. Cool. If I have one patient, I can ventilate them while we're doing decon. Because it's not raining on us, we're doing dry decon. If I want to free my hands up, can I intubate somebody in a hazmat suit? Yeah, you probably could, but I could also just put an eye gel in. Put an eye gel in and start ventilating them. So one patient, you can do a lot while you're deconning them with dry decon. It's harder to do that in wet decon because it's raining on you. It's raining on the patient and those sort of things. But in dry decon, we want you to treat the patient as you're deconning them. Speed that program up. The things to consider those, you got to be careful in your suit. When we do the demonstration in a little while, you're going to see you lose visual field in your suit. You can't hear as well. You can't see as well. You don't want to like rub up against anything in your hazmat suit because it degrades your hazmat suit. It makes it weaker, so if it's an aggressive chemical, theoretically, it could penetrate the suit. So you want to make sure that you're being careful about body position and those kind of things, and we'll show you more of that. But remember, if it's a mass casualty, do I want to be doing IOs and intubating and putting eye gels in? No, because I just want to move quickly. And if I have 50 patients or even 15 patients and somebody's not breathing, they're probably just going to die. And I'm going to move on to the next person. That sounds cold, but it's what we need to do in these situations. All right. As I said earlier, one system is not always the answer. Sometimes water is the best decon solution. Sometimes dry is the best decon system. Sometimes it's what we call dry, wet, dry decon. I had a patient not too long ago with hydrofluoric acid on him. Okay? I'm sure you all know hydrofluoric acid, it takes about 4 cc's to do some serious damage. Right? You get burns, you get depleted calcium, all sorts of problems. In that case, I wanted to be 100% sure that I got the chemical off the person. So I did a dry decon solution, applied the antidote, then did wet decon, then did dry again, and reapplied the antidote, and then sent the patient to a burn center. Okay? So in very critical situations, if you have limited number of patients, you can do dry, wet, dry. If you look at the 2 studies that were done, the one in the US and one in England, it showed the rates of success rates moving chemical for both wet decon and dry decon were up to 99%, depending on the chemical. The difference, however, is the speed of which you can apply that system. Right? If I had a critical unresponsive patient come in and the hazmat tent happened to be set up and the hazmat rollers happened to be set up and everything happened to be ready, which never happens in real life, but if all that happened, then I would do quick dry, wet, dry decon. Right? That's not realistic. It takes 20, 30 minutes to set up rollers in that full system. So the advantage of dry decon now becomes the speed of which you can deliver that decon in patient care. Does that make sense, everybody? I did talk about it. Okay. So the part of the PRISM study, they looked at different methods of decon. All right? And one of the things that we used to practice on a regular basis was when we had a big event, we thought if people came, something happened in a big soccer event or a big conference, and when they were running out, we would just soak them down with water, trying to do dilution as a solution to the pollution, like the toxicology credo. But what they found in the study is if you put the chemical on the person, and then you do that, in this picture you can see that chemical was forced through the clothing onto the patient's skin. Okay? The patient has to be naked to be thoroughly deconned, unless you're using 1,000 gallons a minute of water. And I'm not sure how much that is in liters, but it's a lot. Okay? So unless you're using a ridiculous amount of water, which none of us will have access to, they have to be naked. You can't just soak their clothes and call that decon like we used to think. The study changed the way we look at decon and the order we do it. Everything used to be airway, 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 airway. The decon study, or the PRISM study showed that airway shouldn't always be the first area to be deconned. This made no sense to me whatsoever. So I called Dr. Ziad Kazi, one of the toxicologists that I know real well, and said, Kazi, explain this to me. And the way he explained this to me was, when the patient is breathing, they're moving air around the face, all right? That, with most chemicals that can hurt you, have a decent vapor pressure. If you put those 2 facts together, that most of the product probably evaporated away from the mouth and nose by the time the patient got to us. So deconning open wounds first should be the priority. And then going back to the airway and then to the rest of the body. But when I teach this in real life, when I teach this to providers, very rarely are you deconning with one person. It's just not realistic. So if you have 2 people, just split the body up. Okay? Make sure you cover the entire body. And I'm going to show you how to do dry decon with volunteers on the practical demonstration. But the key points are, you got to wipe slow. All right? It's this speed of wipe. Okay? Now, when you teach it to people, and I've taught this class a lot, they get frustrated a little bit because it takes a lot of discipline to go slow like this, right? Because there's bodies lined up, it's a high-stress environment, we're doing something we don't do on a daily basis. So when you're doing this slow wipe, you get frustrated, but then they're like, this is too slow. I said, okay, go set up your tent. And they went, oh, okay. And they went back to doing that. But you got to remember slow decon, and you can't miss anything on the body. All right? We're going to show you how to roll the patient and do the back and the board they're on, the surface they're on at the same time, those sort of things. But you have to get everywhere. The time for modesty has gone away. Now, they make a special wipe, we'll change words, a special wipe called the FiberTech wipe for doing this. And I apologize I didn't bring one with me, but if you want information on it, just reach out to me afterwards and I'll be more than happy to get it to you. They're not expensive and they have a shelf life of 15 years. Okay? And they're designed 1 wipe per person. But if you don't have those, you can use anything on this list to start dry decon. Everything from absorbent wound dressings to kitchen towels to bedding from sheets to toilet paper to diapers, anything that will absorb. Oh, thank you, sir. Okay, so anything on this list that will absorb liquid, you can use. Hence my comment earlier that Dr. Riley and I have been talking about making a training video that's just kept with the Ministry of Health or whoever. And then, God forbid, a hazmat incident happens, a train derails, a chemical weapons attack happens. You put that out in the media, and then you start wiping each other off till help gets there. Because the faster we get it off, the better. You can save a lot of lives that way. So most of the stuff is available in the hospital. Right? I do want to know who tried kitty litter and wheat-based cereal. Like, who is the guy that said, I'm going to wipe kitty litter all over me? I don't. I think somebody made that one up to see if anybody was paying attention. But the point being, the quicker you can start decon, even improvised decon, the better off your patients are going to be. Okay? The quicker you can start medical care, the better off your patients are going to be. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so we have a couple volunteers. We're going to put on a hazmat suit, and then we're going to do a demonstration on how you would decon the person and the baby during a chemical weapons attack. So while we're getting those people up, I'm just going to talk about the baby real quick. So in Illinois, where I'm from, we have something called, we have something called Emergency Department Approved for Pediatrics. Okay? They have very strict regulations on how you decon children because children become hypothermic really easy, right? If we're using water, especially if we're using cold water, babies get hypothermic very, very fast. So we're probably going to make the baby in using water hypothermic, right? When we're deconning babies, they're very slippery with soap and water. They can be dropped, okay? I much prefer dry decon for pediatrics, and I'm actually presenting that to the pediatricians that make those decisions in Illinois in 2 weeks. But I think if that goes well, that's become the standard for pediatrics to do dry decon because of those reasons. So that's just something for you guys to keep in mind also. All right? We ready, Dr. Riley? All right, so who's putting the suit on? Have a seat right here, my friend. You're a brave soul. Before you put the mask on, you'll want to take your glasses off, though. Okay? You can wait till that exact second. All right, so our friends here who are going to help put the hazmat suit on, we call them angels. And I learned that's what her name means is angel, so it's perfect. That one was meant to be. So the person putting the suit on right now should be doing absolutely nothing except getting briefed on the toxidrome. These are the signs and symptoms we're seeing. The other suit, Riley.
The other suit.
Yeah, the gray one. So the signs and symptoms of what they're seeing, so mentally prepare. I might have to give atropine. I might have to do this. I might have to do that. Okay? The second thing that they should be doing is drinking water and hydrating, because they're going to get really hot in the suit. And I'll tell step by step how to put it on. But I don't care what's happening in the world. I don't care how sick the people are in the world. Do not put the hazmat suit on without going to the bathroom first. I've deconned a lot of patients in my life, and I made that mistake once. And somebody said, why don't you just urinate in the suit? And I said, I don't have to urinate. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the hazmat suit on, but we're only going to put it up to here. And he's going to stay sitting. Okay? He's never going to, you're going to stay sitting. He's going to stay sitting. The reason being, if you sit on the suit, you're putting pressure on the suit and you're degrading the suit. You're making it weaker. So Dr. Riley right now is only going to slide it up to his knees. All right? If you have chemical boots, which normally I would wear, but I couldn't fit them in my luggage in TSA, Germany already has me on a watch list for flying around with chemical gear. All right? So you're only going to go up to the knees and make sure the foot's all the way in.
Okay. Good.
All right. All right. So you notice he has medical gloves on already? Okay. Now we're going to put hazmat gloves on over the medical gloves, the gloves next to the computer there. Okay. Did I grab two left hands? That'd be funny if I did. I did. Oh well, adapt to it. All right. Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stand up. Wait, not yet though. Once we stand up, we're not sitting down again because we're going to have the hazmat suit up. So we're going to stand up and put our hands through, leaving the bottom half of the gloves in the suit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and zip this up. We're going to pull this like that. Okay, just to right there. Okay. And then leave this like this. Not tape yet, Riley. Not tape yet. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to put on the mask. Okay. And then we would tape this and seal this up. But I want to reuse this suit for training. I'm actually going to leave it here so you can have it for training. But you would tape this up like this. Okay. So when you put the mask on, there's normally a filter on this side. Yeah. Whoops. On this side. But last time I brought the filter through the airport security, Germany put me on a watch list. Now every time I fly through Germany, I get extra searched. Yeah. Like they took a picture of my passport and everything. So I don't bring the filter unless I'm going into a war zone now. But he's going to put the mask on, you're going to pull the straps over like this, and you're tighten them, and then you're going to put your hand over like this and inhale, and make sure you got a good seal on the mask. Okay? So, yeah. All right, and that looks like it's going to seal right away. All right, and he's checking the seal, and he looks like he's got a good seal. So now we're going to put the hood up like this. Okay, so look up a little bit. There you go, like that. All right, and now we're going to take the tape. Now we're going to go, you go around each wrist and around the mask to keep it any seals. And if you're wearing boots, you go around the boots also. It's very important, though, that when you do the tape, you leave a tab at the end so they can get it off, or they're going to be really mad at you. It's happened to me before, and I had a very stern talk with my angel. And it was a real event, so I couldn't even cheat. Okay? So you want to go 1.5 times around. So like 1.5, and then make the tab. Okay?
Oh, okay. I already made the tab. It's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you want to go around a little farther, like 1.5 times, and then make the tab. All right. Excuse me. And Dr. Riley did a great job here. You see this tab? Later on, he would have to grab that and pull it off by himself. Good job. Don't forget about me.
I'm the angel.
All right, and we were going to seal this one up normally, but we're not going to do it because when you do it, it rips up the suit, and I'm going to leave this here for you guys to have for training, okay? But we do want to go ahead and tape around here like this, okay? And try not to get your hair. I personally don't have that problem. And sometimes, most of the time, this takes several pieces of chem tape to seal this one. Right? If you like, when you're experienced at this, you can do it much faster. Like, so last true emergency I had deconning, I was actually teaching a hazmat class at a hospital in Illinois, and they walked into the class and said, "Hey Tim, there's a hazmat in the ER," and I'm like, very funny, and they said, "No, there's a hazmat in the ER. Let's go." And it was an organophosphate patient. And so I just got up and got ready in probably 3-4 minutes. And we went and started deconning the patient.
You can breathe, right?
Okay. He's not panicking. All right. Now, as you can see, he has very little dexterity. Like, and I want you to do patient care, right? So if you have to do a needle decompression, you have to put a tourniquet on, it's going to be hard. So something I call an old man trick, because you've been a while, been here, done that, is to take a pair of medical gloves, then slide them over the chemical gloves, and that gives you your dexterity back. It gives you your dexterity back. So as you can see, he'll have a lot more dexterity once this glove is on.
I'm going to go ahead and translate.
Yeah.
Avec les gants ouverts, c'est très difficile d'utiliser les doigts pour délivrer les soins aux patients. C'est pour ça qu'il a remis les gants en latex au-dessus. Apparemment, c'est plus efficace quand tu veux palper le patient ou délivrer un soin urgent pendant la décontamination.
Okay. Is that better? Okay, go ahead and put that one on. Okay. Yeah, and this gloves are for the comfort or fit of the user.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can tell you, I want it tight, I want bigger, I want smaller, whatever they want to make them comfortable. And now you're ready to decon, so let's go decon. Would you mind helping him up to the stage so he doesn't fall? Up to the mannequin? All right, so the patient came into the ER, is one patient, he's exposed to organophosphate, okay? through an accident, he's unstable, not breathing well, those kind of things. If we wait for wet decon to be set up, in the old system, the patient would die prior to getting any care. So we're going to say that the three of us are providing the patient care. All three of us are in hazmat suits, but I only brought one suit with me. Okay? So I'll be the team lead, and you guys will work together. So we're going to do dry decon to start. So can you throw me the towels? All right. So there's no open wounds, so we're going to start with the airway. All right? If you're using a towel or anything that's just generic, you want to rotate the towel frequently. You know how when you're drying a dish or waxing something, if you go too fast, it just smears it? You want to go slow and give absorbent time, right? So we're going to gently, why am I doing this? Here you go. All right, so we're going to gently clean around the eyes and the mouth, okay? My partner here is going to start on the bottom half of the body and work her way down, remembering going really slow. You know, how much is 12 inches in centimeters? About this far in 10 seconds, right? So you want to go about this far in 10 seconds. Mind you, we cut the clothes off and we're not leaving the shorts on, all right? At this point, I'm going, well, the patient's not breathing well, so while they're deconning you, he already did around the mouth and nose, I'm going to start bagging my patient and keep him alive while decon's still going. Okay, keep going. So they're going to go and they're going to keep deconning him. And then I'm going to say, you know what? Somebody yell, give him an atropine. Go ahead. Somebody yell, give him atropine. Thank you. Who gave that order? Good job. All right, good job. All right, so we're going to go, okay, he needs some atropine. What's our preferred site? Dr. Riley, how you want to give it? IM?
IV if we have it. But
All right, so you're going to say do an IO then? Is that what you want?
Yeah, IO will work.
Okay, so she could wipe this area?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, and then she could put an IO in, right? And then give that atropine through that IO. If we don't have that yet, we could wipe an area and give it IM. Okay. Go ahead.
Donc on a décontaminé une partie au-dessus du genou pour pouvoir mettre une intra-osseuse, pour délivrer le médicament. Donc quand on fait la décontamination sèche, dès qu'on a décontaminé une partie, que ce soit ici pour mettre l'intramusculaire ou en bas pour mettre une intra-osseuse, pour ne pas retarder la délivrance des médicaments aux patients durant la procédure même de la décontamination. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne va pas attendre la décontamination de tout le patient. Dès qu'on a le site, c'est bon, on met l'intra-osseuse et on délivre nos médicaments aux patients.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, so they continue down to go through the entire front of the body, okay? Now, we have to do the back and the surface they're on, right? Typically, the back side is more contaminated and the surface is more contaminated than the front side, gravity, okay? So what we're going to do in that case is we're going to roll the patient up. Would you mind rolling over here, Riley, and you come over here? So come over here and just roll them this way. And then what you're going to do is go ahead and roll them towards you. All right? We're going to clean the back of the head, the neck, and this. And then we're going to take 2 towels. You can use one towel, but then you'll have to rotate more often. And so you're going to take the towel and you're going to go down the back like this, wiping the back. And then with the other towel, you're going to clean the entire surface the patient's laying on at the same time. All right, so go ahead. So if it's a backboard for transportation, if it's whatever you're transporting them on, or if it's a bed, you're deconning both at the same time and preventing re-exposure. Okay? So when you do the back, you go straight down like this and take about 5 seconds, and then this one, straight down in about 5 seconds. And the reason you're going straight is then you can track what you've done and you're not missing anything that way. Okay? Now, perfect, just like that. And so you're going to go all the way down And he's going to continue to do that, but you're going to remember to get between the legs. You know, we're healthcare providers. All the modesty has gone away. We have to clean all that and then do insides. I actually have some pictures from Iraq. One of my friends, Dr. Allah, is a physician in Iraq, and I can't call him a certain kind of physician because he was the only physician there. So he was the ER physician, he was the hospital physician, he was the toxicologist, he was the everything. And I have pictures of when ISIS was using mustard in Iraq and they were deconning them. They were telling people to self-decon, right? To go take a shower. But people can't, there's no such thing as self-decon. You can't reach your back. So everywhere where the person couldn't reach, the patient had blisters. So you have to make sure you get every area and work every area.
One other thing to highlight, when you see us going slow, there are a couple of reasons. There's a certain rate of absorption of these different materials. This works a little bit differently than diaper, let's say. And one of the new technologies that's coming out is this Fiber Tech wipe, this company called Fiber Tech. It's activated charcoal in a sheet, and it only absorbs at a certain rate. So if you go too fast, it's just not going to absorb fast enough. So you have to condition yourself to slow down.
Yeah, and that is truly the hard part because, you know, I do this for a living, right? So I decon several patients a year. I teach this 4 or 5 times a month, so I'm in suit a lot. And if there was 20 victims lined up, I would have a hard time keeping myself calm and going slow, right? So you really have to reinforce that. If you're the physician that's standing providing oversight 50 feet away and giving orders, remind them, go slow. Don't go too fast. A lot of that falls on the physician looking at the big picture of the event and saying, all right, everyone calm down. We need to slow down a little bit. And that's a really hard thing to do, but talking to people like Dr. Allah who have been through this in real life with true chemical weapons, that's the most important message he's given me, is tell everyone to calm down and slow down. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the prism or the dry decon or any of the kind of stuff that I explained? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we'll let them take the suit off. We won't make them sit in it for the next 2 hours, although it would be a fun experiment. And Dr. Riley is going to talk about radiation for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back up and show the isolated radioactive decon. All right? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Tim and Lele, for this demonstration. I don't know if the audience have a question. S'il y a une question? Pas de question? Okay, I have a question, please. How can decontamination techniques be adapted to kids, for example?
To peds?
For kids.
Oh, yeah,
Children.
pediatrics. 100%, I support dry decon for pediatrics. I mentioned earlier that Illinois has this regulations, emergency department approved for pediatrics. One of their regulations are if you're going to wet decon a child, the water has to be between 98 and 110 degrees. That's really easy to maintain in a calm, cool, non-traumatic environment. You know, and even at that rate, babies or small kids will become hypothermic really, really quick. So if you have a child, I would much rather do dry decon. I'm glad I stole the baby. I don't know whose baby it is, but I stole it out of the room. I would rather do dry decon and go really slow and maintain the baby. Now, when you're deconning the back of the baby, remember choking baby hold? You're just doing choking baby hold on the baby. The important thing to remember if you're doing that, though, is to decon your gloves between moves. Because if I get the contaminant on my gloves, I decon the baby, and then I pick the baby up, I'm recontaminating the baby. Okay? So if I'm doing wet decon, I'm kind of washing my hands between babies. If I'm doing dry decon, which is much better, I'm deconning my hands and then grabbing the baby and doing the backside of the baby. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Another question, please.
Terminer la question. Au fait, je suppose que cette méthode de décontamination à sec n'est valable que pour l'exposition aux organes phosphorés, c'est-à-dire gaz, pour la forme, c'est-à-dire liquide où il y a des solvants. Est-ce que ça peut être suffisant?
Is it this dry decontamination is applicable for just organophosphorus gas?
No, any,
Or all,
any liquid that's not acidic. Any non-acid liquid.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Je ne sais pas s'il y a d'autres questions. Oui.
Thank you very much for your very nice demonstration.
Oh, thank
Does
you.
the experience of the intervention team, is it taken into account with the kind or the type of decon? I mean, if you're more
Yes.
experienced with the dry decon, you will be more comfortable with dry decon and vice versa.
Yes, you do have to take the experience level, and ideally, we're doing the best system for the patient. But if you have a group of providers who have been trained in one and not the other, obviously you're going to do the one that they feel more comfortable with. But in Tim's perfect world, we're going to select the system that's best for the patient.
Thank you very much for your demonstration. Please, how many decontaminators how many decontaminators per patient are recommended for patients
So
to be efficient?
if you have sufficient resources, I say 3. One person to be the team lead at the head and watching the patient. So the person at the head, if they're doing their job, they're watching to make sure the patient doesn't pass out. The patient doesn't go into respiratory arrest. The patient doesn't decompensate. And the people doing the decon are focused on their job like this, right? Making sure that they're doing it. That being said, I have in the past had, a patient, I'm ready before the rest of the team, so I'll go in myself, start doing decon, and then as more people become available, they'll come in and help, and then one of us will move into the team leader role and have a better structure. But one of the reasons that I like dry decon as a solution is if I'm the only provider immediately available, I can put on a suit, go start doing dry decon, and start doing patient care at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to a second presentation. Merci. Donc on passe à la deuxième présentation.
So I can make one additional comment. When we talk about the efficiency, one of the main things is you've got to be able to take the clothes off of the patient. You've got to clear that off, and you've especially got to be careful underneath belt buckles. When you think about things like organophosphates, so like sarin, taboon, these sorts of things, we often think about how quickly those evaporate. And oftentimes people think that, when you spill gasoline on the ground and how quickly it evaporates, that's what people think organophosphates look like when they evaporate. And it's not that fast. It's actually much slower. It evaporates about the speed of water, which is pretty slow. And so when you're taking a patient and they're not fully decontaminated, you're carrying that organophosphate with them. And one of the experiences we had from East Al Ghouta in Syria was the number of healthcare providers that actually wind up dying from organophosphate poisoning, and they weren't even close to the attack. And so that's a really important thing to consider. And one other thing is that there was a lot of suspicion that the timing of organophosphate attacks have intentionally been done in the evening times. And these are when women are in their nightgowns, and it was not okay to take off the clothes. And so it was one of those situations where we are afraid that culture was used against people. So a very serious consideration. But anyway, some final thoughts there. So thank you. So my name is Riley Jones again. I have a habit of speaking too fast, so please tell me to slow down if I need, okay? Good. So I'll be talking about radiation. A quick question. So just some show. Has anybody been trained in radiation management before? Got one. Okay. In theory. Okay. Thank goodness for that. Okay. And everybody is emergency physician or toxicology, correct? Okay. And how many are trainees, residents, or medical students? Everybody's attending? Consultant? Okay. So I'll be talking hopefully to the level for the residents to make sure that they have a full understanding, because it's the residents who are going to be there in the middle of the night, you know, when this event happens, okay? So now, let's see, do I have slides up? Yeah, show the slides, please. Very good. So all of these slides are freely available. If you scan with your iPhone, it just goes to a PDF. It doesn't collect any data. We do this for all of our hosts to make sure that there's no data tracking or anything like that. Very good. Okay, no more phones. Okay, and then we're going to go through this rather quickly. This is designed to be a 1-hour didactic lecture. We're going to skip a lot of this because I'm just going to assume that everybody in here already knows everything. Some disclosures that this cannot be a formal recommendation, but it is the best that we can officially state, okay? And so I'm going to talk about an episode that happened in Guyana, Brazil. We always, when we think about nuclear events, we think about, big bombs or reactors that melt down or things like that. But the majority of radiation exposures that we have are going to be workplace exposures, or they're going to be accidental exposures. And there was a situation in a small area called Guyana, Brazil. And what happened is this old hospital that worked for quite a long time, and they had a radiotherapy wing. Hospital shut down, and they built a fence all the way around the perimeter of the place, and they were just waiting for somebody to buy the facility, fix it back up, and run it. As it turns out, nobody was buying the facility, and the economy was having some issues, and people were going around and trying to take the metal and sell it to scrapyard. And at one point, somebody took a radio capsule for physiotherapy, which is this thing right here, They took this and were taking it to the scrapyard. When they were trying to open it up to break it apart, the gentleman that saw it, he noticed this blue light, a blue flash that he saw, and he saw this very beautiful powder that was. What actually was in there was radioactive cesium-137. So he took this, actually took it home, and unfortunately, he allowed the powder to spread on the floor. And the sad part is he had a 6-year-old who really was attracted to this blue powder. And it was on the child's hands. The child actually ate some of it. And eventually, he took this metal and everything and deposited it in the scrapyard. About 2 weeks later, the spouse of this metal scrapper noticed that many people in the community were getting sick, and they were having burns on their hands and things like this that we see down here. This is an actual patient photo. This is available on PubMed. Okay. Now, we often think of burns like Hiroshima, the nuclear attacks in World War II, and these are gamma burns. But these are different. You see, they have a very different appearance than what we would think here. These are beta emission burns. That's what we see there. Okay. So the scrapper's wife, she actually takes the device to a hospital. He actually takes it back to the hospital, just trying to get rid of the thing, and then notifies the authority. They attempt to reverse the cesium with Prussian blue. The problem is by this time, 2 weeks later, the cesium had already left the bloodstream and had deposited into people's tissues. Once it leaves the bloodstream, it's really hard to chelate. You probably can't actually, to chelate and have it be flushed out. They spent something like $15 million trying to clean all the community up. And somehow they detected it in 3 buses, 14 cars, 42 houses, 5 pigs. Somehow it got into the toilet paper supply. Big deal if it was COVID times, right? And then they actually had to scrap out the vast majority of the topsoil and take it to a landfill site. Massive cleanup, very expensive, and a lot of people got sick from, that was just 3 ounces. I mean, that's enough for the palm of your hand. That's not much. And so the problem is going from that very realistic, very easy to happen anywhere in the world scenario and plugging that into everything that we all have to know right here. And ideally, if I had a full hour, I could walk you through all of this in a meaningful and memorable way, and you would have it all. But if we can't do that, you have my slides, and you're free to use them and distribute them however you need. Okay? But we're going to try. Okay? Now, a couple of things about background radiation. We have several different types of radiation. If you pick up a nuclear textbook, they're going to have so many different types of radiation that they will talk about. But in reality, you only need to know 3. There's alpha, there's beta, and there's gamma. In reality, you only need to know 2 types. The particle-sized ones and ones that are non-particle. Non-particle just shoots right through you and it disappears from, it's gone. You don't have to worry about it. You do have to worry about the substance that's emitting that gamma. Gamma is very strong. Good. So you do have to worry about that particle that's emitting the gamma. But these are the ones that you really worry about, okay? Because they're small, they're particulate, and the radiation emitted itself is a particle, okay? And it can contaminate the environment. This is the stuff that we actually have to remove, okay? And so looking at the different ways that it can actually transmit, we know about alpha particles. They're very fast moving. But they're easily stopped by even a sheet of paper. Yeah, it just doesn't penetrate very much. Beta particulate matter can be stopped by some thick clothing or some foil. If you don't have that, it actually can't penetrate into you. And then gamma keeps moving all the way through you, through the wall, through the next wall, through 20 people, a school bus, on. It moves very far. And looking at the way that we have modes of contamination, you can be exposed to this, but you're not contaminated with the alpha particle or the substance itself, or the gamma substance itself. But these actually do persist in the environment. You can ingest them, inhale them. They can remain on your skin. They can get rained down on your skin. And so we have to think about these when we think about decontamination and when we think about treatment. This is another summary. All these different kinds of radiation that physicists talk about, but they essentially all act in the same way. So in terms of the different types of threats, this is what all of the scary movies are about. These are lower likelihood because it takes quite a bit of technology in order to make an improvised nuclear device. Nuclear material is still not all that reactive in order to create a massive chain reaction. It takes a lot of technology. But a dirty bomb, this is a serious consideration. Any physician's office that has an X-ray machine or any kind of radiotherapy, that is a risk. And in the United States, I know right now we are in heavy lockdown mode. I don't know why, but they're really starting to monitor where our radiation sources are, and they're keeping down to the gram inventory of where all of it is in the United States. Okay, and that's because when we talk about dirty bomb, it's not a fissile event. it's not a nuclear chain reaction that distributes all this stuff. It is it's a small stick of dynamite, and you just put all of that radioactive material on it, you detonate the dynamite, and that just disperses it everywhere. And in terms of infrastructure damage, it damages as much as a stick of dynamite does. However, it contaminates a huge area with very expensive to get rid of radiation. And in many ways, we think of it more of a psychological warfare device and an area denial weapon. It's like a landmine. You know it's there, and everybody knows not to go near it. And that's the way that that's one way that it would be considered useful. You can have exposure. You never actually have the part, but you're getting exposed to the radiation energy. Or you can have contamination. This is what we really worry about here. Okay. These slides are available. I'm going to skip past this. We'll talk a little bit more about just some of the interesting background that I know I, for myself, find interesting. The pyrocumulus cloud, that's what this actually is. That's the name of the cloud. The thing to know is that this radioactive material can be ejected extremely high up into the atmosphere. About an hour later, you will have radioactive soot from everything that's been vaporized in the air that starts to rain down. That's highly radioactive. That's what we consider part of the fallout. You really need to avoid that stuff. And some of this stuff gets trapped up in the stratosphere, can circulate and remain up in the atmosphere for a long time. I think about this every time I fly. I know that we all do this, but I always carry my own Geiger counters. And has anybody activated a Geiger counter when you're on the ground versus when you're in the air? It's a lot of radiation up there. It's worth a try. These, I think I got this one on Amazon, maybe $100. A lot of fun to have up in an airplane. So we've talked about black rain and the radioactive soot, and there's this other phenomenon called ground shine. And these are when the decay material, they've been on the ground, and people are walking around trying to clean up. That radioactive material is shining up and can contaminate you that way. Okay? And for the chemists, here we have this. Now this is what, we're a US-based organization, so we have to use the US-based system. This is how we actually orient all of our coordination. So if there is a detonation here, then fall is going this way. So obviously we're not hospitals here, or our triage areas, they're going to be here. We're going to have triage and sorting areas, evacuation centers, and then they will go on to different tertiary facilities. And you have these staged things. One other thing is that when this happens, you should anticipate that your hospital is going to go into, in the US, we call them crisis standards of care. Okay, and that's where kind of all bets are off and things change. In the US, it's, with COVID, it was, we became aware of how big a deal it was for someone to declare a public health emergency. Suddenly, we change the priorities of who gets, if we have limited blood supplies and somebody needs blood transfusion, that changes when you're in a crisis standard of care or in a public health emergency. And there will be situations where I only had to do this, thankfully, one time when COVID was really bad. We took medications that was actively infusing into one patient who had, but things were not. We were so limited on medicines, we took that bag and hooked up the tubing and had to give it to another patient. And in certain public health crises or crisis standards of care, that's actually a thing that is not only acceptable, in some cases we would encourage it. Okay. Now we've talked about triage, and I'm not going to go into this too much, but we have certain tools that we developed. We have the EAST tool, which I hope that everybody can refer to later so that we can keep moving. Is that everybody okay with this? Okay, good. And how we decide who actually needs care. And the thing is you're going to have all these different levels of acute radiation sickness, okay? And it's going to be severe, moderate, or mild. The problem is your patients, they're not going to show up and say, hey, doctor, I had 6 gray of radiation exposure. Can you help treat me? They're not going to tell you that. And in fact, you're not going to be able to biochemically really pinpoint them for several days in the best of cases. And you have to go based off of a lot of different symptoms. How many times they were, or how quickly they started to vomit, how many times they're vomiting per day, all these very, if they have diarrhea, these sorts of things, headaches, fever, burns, a lot of different things. And the thing to remember here is that you look not just which is the worst category, that they have one criteria, but where the majority of their criteria fall. That's really important for us as emergency and first responders and things like that, because we're going to have to decide who's actually going to get treated. Oftentimes we would think it would be this person, but it's actually going to be this person. Okay? And then thinking about how a mass casualty, how it actually shows up. What happens in the beginning is you get some initial people that will show up, and then things start to get better, and then it's actually a double wave of people that come. The first people that show up, they're usually the ones that can walk or run to the emergency. They're the healthy ones. And so you actually get this double wave. And we, so that's important. So once you start to see an event or you get notification of an event, you need to start clearing out beds from the emergency department. Call everybody, admit them, just get them out of the emergency department. We've got to make space. We know that this is coming. This is an example of my own hospital. We have mass casualty response plan for situations even up to 1,000 patients showing up in one day, which we would completely collapse, but we at least know that we have a plan of how we're going to collapse. And the other thing is that there's actually a formula, I thought I had it in this slide deck, in some ways to predict about how many patients you anticipate will eventually show up to the emergency department. And if you take the number of total patients that have shown up within that first hour and then double that number, that's how many patients you can expect over the course of the next, I think 6 hours or 12 hours. That's a general rule, okay? But it can be helpful for when you're arguing with administrators that, hey, we need to get these patients out of the emergency room because this is happening. Now, for our risk reduction, one of the questions that I like to ask is, who thinks that we need to be in one of those breathing suits, that's completely sealed off, you've got a scuba tank and things like that? I often have a couple of people that say, oh, that's what I'm going to wear. And that would be great, but you're going to run out of air in about 30 minutes. That's as long as your oxygen tank will last. The other thing to know is that there are really good studies. Once you enclose yourself in that suit, your ability to think at a higher cognitive function drops by about 10%. So you lose intelligence as soon as you zip yourself up in those. And that's way too much personal protective equipment, what we call PPE. That's way too much. You don't need that much. And we'll go over how much you do need. But where does decontamination happen? It does not happen inside the hospital. It has to happen outside of the hospital. We don't need cesium being tracked all over the hospital, okay? And we do this in order to prevent the patient from having ongoing exposure to that radioactive material, and then to prevent the exposure to healthcare providers. And I don't know if you all have the same system or if you use the system, but we have the A, B, C, and D levels. Perfect. So really what you need is level C and a face mask, basically what we would wear for COVID. And in really tough situations, long sleeves and airway protection, those are the most important pieces that you can have, okay? And this is what it looks like. General COVID. So you've got a mask. If it's an N95, that's great. Goggles. Certainly you need a scrub cap for your hair. Long sleeves and some gloves. some boots. It really does not require a whole lot. Okay, this is actually from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. That's where they actually invented nuclear technology. Now, we talk about decontamination. One of the big things that you have to do is, number one, you're going to have to take the patient's clothes off. That's where nearly 90% of the contamination is going to be. And when you remove that, you've taken the total dose of all this substance that's just contaminating and irradiating the patient. You've removed it. That is hands down the most important thing you can do. The thing that you have to do is you have to do so carefully and make sure that you're not actually aerosolizing as you're cutting people's clothing, that you're not aerosolizing it into a fine powder that's getting into their airways. You're going to cover their mouth as well. And then when you start to wipe the patients down, you're going to focus on areas that were exposed of their skin: face, arms, hair. You can use dry wipes, you can use moist wipes, tape, lint rollers, things like that. It's not a lot of water, and that's really important, because when you use water, you've got radioactive water that you now have to figure out what to do with, and you can't just put that down the drain. Okay, so this is generally what we would consider, if you can, do your decontamination in water pour, in a water pour form. Okay, and then you would need to clean very closely around wounds and then cover them. Okay. Be very careful of this. You don't want to not clean the wound and then cover it. You don't want to clean it improperly and then cover it, because then you're actually just holding that radiation right there on the spot, and that's not going to be good. And how are you going to know when to stop? You're going to keep cleaning that patient's body until you can read till less than 2 times the background level of radiation. Does anybody know your background level of radiation here? It turns out I do. I took it for you. And y'all actually have fantastically low radiation here. Y'all have about 30 counts per minute, CPM. Most other places, minimum is 40 counts per minute. We don't really worry about it until it's like 200 counts per minute. But the problem is that there are many times you're not going to be able to fully decontaminate somebody to only being, 2 times the background radiation. So the total maximum time you're going to decontaminate somebody going through that whole entire process is 3 times. Okay? After that, either it's, actually being emitted from, let's say it's already inside their body. There is radioactive shrapnel that is stuck inside their body and you're still detecting it. There can be a lot of different ways that we can get it. Let's see. And to give an example, the background radiation that we have where I live is 20 microsieverts per hour. And here it is just under 10 microsieverts, right? It's about 9 microsieverts per hour. That's what we measure here. Okay? And that's what I've been detecting all morning. So y'all are doing really good here. Is that good to know? Yeah, good. Okay. So a couple of tricks, and we'll walk you through some of these, is you'll use these, you'll use wipes, dry wipes, focus skin exposure. You can use tape or lint rollers in order to get to hard to access areas. And you would literally take a lint roller and roll it usually in the corner spaces where it's not easy to wipe. Okay. And when you're putting tape, make sure that you're taping down active material. I just want to say that again. And then if you do have to use water, or in a really big exposure like in Chernobyl or some of the other nuclear releases, you will tell people, go ahead, use soap and water, knowing that it's contaminated and that is going to be a very quiet neighborhood for the next 10,000 years or so after you leave. But you can use shampoo for your hair, but do not use conditioner. Got it? Conditioner will actually fix it to your hair so that it stays with you, but shampoo is easy to wash away. Okay. Now, into the medical management. So if a patient has been brought in and we're working on decontamination, and suddenly they stop breathing or something like that, or they have pneumothorax, or they go into a shockable rhythm, you're going to stop your decontamination, resuscitate the patient, and then continue your decontamination. Okay? Everybody comfortable on that? Comfortable? Okay. Because when they got to you, they were alive. Now they're unalive, and that's usually a quick fix at that point. Good. Now, this is a very busy slide. But very quickly, you're going to have to figure out what was the exposure type. Was it contamination only, exposure only, or contamination with exposure? This is the one that everybody really cares about, right? 3 decontamination cycles, and if they are successful, you'll discharge the patient. If they are not, you're going to send them on to the medical facility. For some reason, they've got still a bunch of radiation. Either you need to chelate it, you need to find that radioactive shrapnel, something like that. You're going to go through your medical stabilization. This is controversial to take all of these different swabs of all the different orifices, the ears, the nose, taking blood samples, urine samples, things like that. There are some places that say it's not actually that useful and you're not going to get a result in time. Where are you going to send the lab? Most of the time, it's not easy to just call up and say, hey, where do I send this suspected contamination? And then you have to ask yourself, is there going to be internal contamination suspected? If not, you're going to continue your decontamination attempts and you're going to discharge if they're medically stable. If you do suspect, you're going to initiate your medical interventions that we'll go over. Now for exposures, it's essentially the same, but everything that we're worried about here is going to be in our dose estimation, okay? I'm going to be very quick about this because I could spend several hours here. But when we're estimating, we've got several different ways that we can go about dose estimation. Does everybody know about time to vomiting? Anybody heard about this? This is one of the quickest, simplest ones. If an event happens, let's say in a stadium, and you get a phone call that patients are showing up and a radiation event is suspected, and if you ask the patient, hey, have you been vomiting? And if it has been 4 hours or less, that is a very heavy exposure. That patient likely is not going to make it. Still worth trying to help them, but they're going to be a very sick patient. If they start vomiting within 1 hour of exposure, there's nearly 100% mortality, okay? And so that's a very quick way. Tim was talking about, hey, if you can hear my voice, go over here. Time to vomiting is another good example of that. It's not the only thing that you have to take into consideration. So if you have somebody that's kind of close, remember that first slide where we talked about it needs to be somebody in the majority of a column, not just the worst column. Okay? We have other things. This is very technical, but we have the ability to geolocate where you were at what time and calculate your radiation exposure that way. That data never comes within enough time, so that's not what we're going to use. This is can actually be very accurate. The absolute lymphocyte change. We'll talk about that. This actually is not very reliable. They'll take some blood samples and they'll basically look at the white blood cells and see how many of them have chromosomal abnormalities, and they can detect it that way. But basically, one way or another, you're going to get to your radiation dose estimate, okay? And if they have low estimates, they're not likely to get any symptoms at all. Or if you did give them the interventions, these are not like just give them to everybody. It's not, N-acetylcysteine and, it smells bad or tastes bad. It's not that. These are risky medicines to use. And so you only want to use them if the benefits outweigh the risks, okay? And so somebody with low exposure here, I wouldn't give it to them, okay? Now somebody with really high exposure, this is time to vomit in less than an hour, they're not going to benefit either, so don't give it to them. This is definitely going to be a no-notice, high casualty event, and you're going to have strained resources. So it's going to be these folks that fall right here in the middle. These are going to be the ones that are likely to get neutropenia and are likely to benefit from the therapies that we'll talk about. So here we are, time to vomiting. Okay, this is the Guskova nomogram. What you do is you actually measure the number of lymphocytes and how they deplete per day, and you can actually then go back and calculate what their dose was. But it takes a couple of days before you can actually get that information. Okay? That's there for everybody to use. That's the formula for it, if anybody is a math person. Now, so we've calculated how much their dose was, and now we're going to look at the different medical interventions. And it actually depends on which type of population that you're dealing with, okay? Are you in a crisis standard of care? Is there trauma that has gone on? Are there burns or not? All of these different things matter here. And again, we're going to be focusing on the folks that have the moderate radiation sickness, okay? So all of your different order panels, general orders, obviously vitals, intake, output, draw some blood. You're going to isolate them, obviously. You're going to do pain control. Morphine works very well. Acetaminophen is good. Okay. And here is where we can actually impact patients' mortality. So when you have the hematopoietic acute radiation sickness or syndrome, you can actually give granulocyte stimulating factors and platelet stimulating factors. And the use of these improves the mortality quite substantially. I think I have that on a slide over here. And I've got another question. So somebody, let's say their hemoglobin gets really low or their platelets get really low and you need to give them a transfusion. Of course you're going to leukoreduce and filter the white blood cells out, right? But do you irradiate that blood? Who wants to vote? Should you irradiate that blood? That patient's already gotten so much radiation. Are you going to irradiate that blood before you give it to them? Who votes yes? Okay. Who votes no? We're not going to give more radiation to the blood before we give it to them. Okay. So we actually irradiate all the blood products before we give them. And the reason is because this patient, their bone marrow is so suppressed that you're going to be giving them somebody else's blood. And even though we use those leukoreducing filters, we never can quite get rid of all the white blood cells. And you have a real risk that you're going to give them somebody else's blood cells, stem cells, graft versus host disease. And so in that case, we actually irradiate all of their blood. And that's gamma radiation only. It goes right through. It only impacts the white blood cells. Because in the bloodstream, white blood cells are the only ones that have a nucleus, right? So those are the only ones that are actually going to have chromosomal damage. Those are the ones we're trying to get rid of. Okay? So we do irradiate all of the blood products as we give it. Okay? And then, so these are some general protocols right here. Some of the things to notice are going to be our platelet cutoffs. Okay? So generally 50,000 on the platelets. That's going to be your cutoff if they have other traumas or cerebral edema, okay? You really need to pay attention to that. So your neurologic exam is going to be really important, okay? And then you'll also have like a lower threshold if you have reduced ability to monitor your CBCs. And so I was joking, so this is a bag of dextrose here. We call this liquid gold in the United States right now. because we're out of IV fluids of all types. We're also out of blood culture tubes, and we're low on blood count tubes. And so if you get into a situation where you have reduced ability to monitor, you'll actually have a lower threshold for being able to monitor your blood counts. And then something else to know about the absolute neutrophil count. We have, in many places, they will advocate for prophylactic antibiotics, most bone marrow transplant units. And in general, people will start a broad-spectrum antibiotic like levofloxacin once the absolute neutrophil count has been reduced to 500 or lower for 3 consecutive days. They'll go ahead and start the levofloxacin because the risk of having a nosocomial infection or an opportunistic infection happen is quite high in that case. And there's one other thing. Most of the time, these radiation patients, they will have diarrhea. But sometimes they get constipated. And one thing to know is that when a patient's absolute neutrophil count is 500 or lower, you cannot give anything rectally for, let's say, suppository for constipation. It's a complete no-go, okay? And then in some very severe cases, you can give a stem cell transplant. Okay. Now, the gastrointestinal, we prefer things like ondansetron, prochlorperazine, loperamide, lorazepam, these sorts of things. And then right now the recommendation is to put them on prophylactic proton pump inhibitor. Good. Now the cutaneous, this kind of matters a little bit. Everybody gets afraid of the acute exudative radiodermatitis. That's where your skin just necroses off. It's all those really scary pictures from Chernobyl, right? I think there were only a couple of cases of it actually, but it's very scary. The thing to know about the skin is that there are many times that radiation will actually be trapped inside the skin and it will not slough off for several days. So that patient, remember we tried to decontaminate them 3 times and we could not get rid of it. Sometimes it's just too deeply into the skin and it will slough off after about 2 weeks, okay? That can actually be expelled through the sweat. And so when we said in those general orders that we isolate the patients, even those insensible losses that we have from sweat, that can be a serious risk to loved ones who want to give their family member a hug or something like that. And then the last thing to know is that radiation burns, they're different than thermal burns. Thermal burns, they heal at a rate of about 0.5 millimeter per day in any direction. If you've got that one skin cell or that one island of skin graft, it can grow by about 0.5 millimeter per day under optimal conditions. Radiation is a lot slower than that, okay? And then, so when we talk about antibiotics, that's only if you have a confirmed infection. When you do the topical antihistamines, I've talked to a dermatologist about this. They actually don't recommend this unless you absolutely have to have that. For any kind of burn, they actually, the recommendation from several dermatologists has been that we would not use these because they're more likely to get a hypersensitivity to the topical antihistamine than to get benefit. And so the general recommendation is not to use that. Now, one other thing should be the topical glucocorticoids. There it is. Water-based only, okay? And these can reduce inflammation. There's enough evidence that people do give a recommendation for this. And the question then becomes, well, what about the face? We all know that we don't like to use steroids on the face, correct? Right? It thins the skin, you can get, permanent discoloration. If you use the lowest potency steroids, you can use them for up to 2 weeks without getting those permanent changes to the skin. So they can be used in that case, something to be aware of. And then the fluid resuscitation. We always think about the different formulas for aggressive fluid resuscitation with burns, right? But not if they have cerebral edema. Okay, so again, your neurologic exam is important. Now, the thing about the neurologic exam is that they're usually only present in really severe cases. And if they are going to manifest, they tend to be quite delayed. And so I'm up here saying that you need to monitor that neurologic exam very closely. Also should not be much of a problem. And that's because a lot of different things, your ability to transfuse blood products, even IV fluids, are going to be based on your neurologic exam. Okay. Now, different chelation therapies. You're going to want to consult a specialist, a toxicologist perhaps, on which medications you will use, how you'll administer them, for which types of contamination are they beneficial, and things to know about how they actually work. This will be available, but we don't have time. And then this is a chart mapping all of these different symptoms that somebody might get and when they can actually show up. Okay. Now, these colony stimulating factors, we do need to talk about those. You want to administer those early, and anybody that has the moderate exposure, you administer those early. And that's because your survival rate, you can nearly triple it. Okay? But it's, it's as you know, when you use these colony stimulating factors, the patients can get fevers, they get bone pain, they can have a lot of complications from it. But you actually do have FDA, approval and different things for this. But massively improved survival rates there. Again, here are the slides. These are 2 apps. They're freely available, and I've also confirmed there's no data that you can download them. They don't require a connection or anything. You have it, and it's just a dead app that has tons of information in them, and can actually walk you through exactly how you'll manage what as you're, in case I was speaking fast or my accent or something like that. Now, I want us to do a couple of practical things. When we talk about radiation detection, short break. I want to take a short break. That's what I want to do. Is that okay? Good. Wait, not yet. Wait, what do I do? Break. I'm just gonna walk towards the patient. Oh, okay. I think based on the timing, maybe I'll just do one important demonstration here. So there's one other thing to know about your radiation devices, your Geiger counters. Give me just 1 second while this heats up. So when you're doing a radioactive survey, you've decontaminated the patient, and you're having to walk around and actually find where the radiation is. Do you see how slowly I'm moving? You have to move slowly. Okay? And this one will just move slowly. Can y'all hear this? One second, here we go. Yeah, that's okay. I don't know what that sound is. Sorry, we'll just move this here. So there's a problem. This one is going crazy. This one is not doing anything. This one actually works really well. When I usually travel, this is the one that I carry. So why is this one not going off? Huh? No, there's definitely radioactive material there. This is 100% real. This device only detects beta and gamma and X-ray and everything. It does not detect alpha. This one is very fancy. It also detects alpha. And so you have to know. Okay, don't show how it's getting. Yeah. But this one is not going to do hardly anything. So you have to know your different devices because they have different levels that they detect. So for alpha detection, those are usually very sensitive devices. And they have to be because remember, alpha particles, they are stopped by even a sheet of paper. They can be stopped by a drop of water. So if an alpha particle is going through the air and rain is coming down and it hits that water, it's going to be trapped in that water. The problem is that if you then drink that water, you're ingesting all of that alpha contamination. Does anybody recall the polonium poisoning in London? Do you remember was it Skripal, was that his name? No, it wasn't Skripal. Who was the other guy? I don't know, another guy. It was a defector from the Soviet Union. He drank polonium-laced tea. And the problem is that even with this device, if he set that immediately on the cup of tea, it would not have been able to detect the polonium. Because the polonium, the alpha particles that would have emitted, they would not actually be able to exit the water. And so the device would have been useless. But he's ingested all of that. And that alpha, even though it's very low intensity, okay, it'll only damage the first 1, 2, maybe 3 layers of cells. But you've ingested that into your intestine. And now all of your intestines are being degraded by 1, 2, or 3 cell layers. And you get this massive sepsis in the intestine from your intestines liquefying. So it can be really bad. But anyway, the point is that this is an excellent detector, and this one detects alpha. Okay, good. Any questions? Who's going to radiate the patient's blood before you give it to them? Okay, good, excellent. Everybody, nice. Okay, good. And who's going to administer rectal suppositories when the absolute neutrophil count is below 500? Nobody. Hey, okay. All right. What other questions? Good students indeed. Oh, one other question. So let's say that the patient has some sort of trauma. They're going to need surgery. Broken bone, let's say. And the surgeons are saying, oh no, we need to wait until they're done with the radiation sickness. Do we allow the surgeon to delay the care, or do we say, no, actually, you need to get into the OR right now? It can, but their operative outcomes actually wind up being worse if you operate after the lymphocytes have started to fall. And so it's one of those strange situations where you get to say, no, surgeon, you have to operate now. It's one of those things that we know. So that's a good little, thing for the pocket, okay? Good. I like your thinking, though. What your rheumatology? Well, those are the smartest doctors they make. You'll know all this. This would be great. But yeah, see, the radiation in this room is very low compared to everywhere else that I've been. So this is the best place to stay, I guess. Good. Any questions? We're happy to stay for any questions or comments. We do these trainings whenever anybody asks. Iman, she randomly saw us in Abu Dhabi and asked us to come and give this training. I wish that we had time to go through a decontamination process. It's a little bit laborious. It's we are. Oh, that's why we need a break. Okay, now we're going to do a decontamination. Good. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for this very clear and very interesting presentation and demonstration. So you have something else? Quick. Okay. Last demonstration, very short one. 5 minutes. Yeah, no problem, please.
Hey, where'd the scissors go? Okay. Okay, so we're going to just do a quick demonstration on radiation decon. I would rather decon 10 radiation patients than 1 chemical patient. It's a lot, what's that? Why? I'm going to show you why. One, it's a targeted decontamination. So as Dr. Riley said, he's got his meters, whatever. He's going to come and he's going to survey the patient and say, okay, this patient may have radiation on them or in them, because he's going to find that source of the radiation. So we're going to do a targeted decontamination of that area. But before we do that, we're going to have our partner here. We're going to cut the clothing off the patient. So we're going to simulate this suit as the clothing. Now, it's a little bit different cut than you would on a chemical patient or a trauma patient. When we're doing trauma, we just cut the clothes off as fast as we can and get rid of it. When we're doing chemical, we cut the clothes off as fast as we can and get rid of it. If we cut the clothing fast on radiation, what might we do, as Dr. Riley talked about? We might aerosolize that radiation. So we're actually going to cut slow on radiation. So we're just going to start here and then cut all the way down.
The mask
Yes, and we're wearing COVID-like, and us, we're wearing COVID-like PPE. So an N95 and, you know, what you would wear for biological protection. You don't, if it was a dirty bomb, you know, where everything in the air is contaminated, I might consider wearing full level C, you know, with an APR, a gas mask and everything. Keep going. But for something like this where it's isolated radiation, I would just wear biological protection. Okay. So for the sake of time, we'll speed the cut up, but you understand it's a slow cut, right? Okay. And then cut down the arms and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so as we're moving the crows, Dr. Riley's doing a survey, and he's going to say, okay, this spot right here is contaminated, and this spot right here is contaminated. All right? So we're going to decant those, but we're not going to use volume water. You can use baby wipes, you can use spray bottles, you can use anything. But before we do that, we want to remove the patient's clothes. The arms too, please. Okay, so we're going to fold that down. All the radiation should be on the outside of the patient's clothes, not on the inside of the patient's clothes. All the clothes are laying flat on the sheet, right? So we're going to take this up, and my partners are here going to help. We're going to grab this sheet, and we're going to roll it like this, trapping the radiation inside and keeping the clean side on the outside so we're not spreading it or aerosolizing it. Right? So when we get to here, don't say this, I did. When we get to here, we're going to log roll the patient up, and we're going to continue to do that all the way through to this side. Okay? Then we're going to log roll the patient back this way, and we're going to roll that side up. So come this way, rolling it the contaminated side in. And then you're just going to take this and fold it down away from the patient's head. Okay. Now, once we do that, we're going to scrub that area again, and then, doctor, you re-meter it. Now, there'd be more sheets under them, but for the sake of time, we re-meter that area. If it's clean, the patient goes off into the emergency room. If it's dirty, we repeat that process. We clean it, log roll the sheet up again, and do that. Dr. Kazi, who taught me this way, recommends putting 3 sheets under the patient. That way you can do it 3 times. Because as Dr. Riley said, you want to get it down to twice background or 3 attempts. And that was our quick demonstration.
Yeah.
Everybody is hungry. So, nous avons un petit break de 10 minutes maximum. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.